Chapter 13. Tribal Communities During British Rule. Let's learn. Life of the tribals, changes in tribal community, tribal revolts, Munda Rebellion. Tribal people are scattered across different parts of India. They form a considerable proportion of population of India. The traditional and cultural distinction of each tribal community has made them distinguishable from each other. However, during the British rule in India, their life was quite difficult. Just as the British plundered India for its riches, they also exploited the tribal communities during that period. Tribals, as we know, are people who are relatively isolated from larger cultural influences and have a relatively greater cultural homogeneity. The invasion of the British on their land created turbulence in their lives. Let's study about them in this chapter. Life of the tribals. India had diverse communities of tribals which included the Mundas, Santhals, Orions, Baigas, Gonds, Khasis, Nagas and the Khonds. They lived in dense forests and had their own rituals and traditions. They did not have caste distinctions and all were treated equally. Economic activities. The tribals lived close to nature. They utilized forest resources for their living. Some were nomads while others led a settled life in the forests. Hunting and gathering were the main occupations of Khonds, the tribal people of Odisha. They hunted in groups and divided the meat among themselves. The tribals collected fruits, roots, honey and medicinal herbs from the forest. Fruits and food cooked in sal and mahua oil were also eaten. Tribals obtained grains in exchange of their valuable forest produce. Some tribals even worked in farms as laborers or carried loads and engaged in construction of roads. Since they lacked the locally available goods needed for daily needs, they had to depend on the traders and the money lenders. They borrowed money from them and returned it with the cash produce. Info Hive. The Baiga tribals were hesitant to work in farms as laborers as they considered themselves to be people of the forest and it was beyond their dignity to work in others' farms. Jhum cultivation. The tribals followed shifting cultivation or jhum cultivation. It was also known as slash and burn cultivation. Slash and burn is a form of shifting agriculture primarily used by tribal communities. Natural vegetation is cut down and burned, and the ash is mixed with soil as a method of clearing and enriching the land for cultivation. It provides nutrients to the soil. The seeds are sown on the land and the crop is allowed to grow. The method of sowing seeds in jhum cultivation is known as broadcasting or scattering. The crops are harvested and then later, when the land becomes infertile after a few years of cultivation, the farm is left fallow for several years. The tribals then move to a new fresh plot and repeat the same procedure. This kind of cultivation was prominent in forests and hilly regions of northeast and central India. Brain tickler. Which nutrient is provided to the soil by the slash and burn cultivation? Herding and rearing. Van Gujars of the Shivalik and Tarai regions in North India and the Labadis of Andhra Pradesh were cattle herders. They looked after the cattle and moved in search of green pastures for their cattle. As the grass got exhausted at one place, they migrated to a new place. Some other tribals were the Gaddis of Kulu, who were shepherds, and the Bakarwals of Kashmir, who reared goats. Settled agriculture. The tribals started to live in settled communities and practiced agriculture at one place. The cultivation of crops was generally near the houses. The right of the land was distributed. That is, the land belonged to the clan and not a single person. The crop was harvested and distributed evenly according to the need of each household. Change in the tribal community. The life of the tribals completely changed when the British invaded their territories. Prior to the British, The tribal chief enjoyed a privileged position and had authoritative powers such as own police, laws, forest powers and judiciary. The onset of the British rule changed the whole system of the tribals as the powers were taken away from the hands of the tribal chiefs. In fact, they even had to pay a tribute to the British and control tribal groups for the British. They had to forego their traditional functions and work for the British as their vassals. Agriculture. The British, on the other hand, wanted the tribals to settle down at one place and practice agriculture. It was difficult for them to track and control the nomadic clans and therefore aimed to make them work as peasants and laborers in farms. They defined their rights, measured the land, and fixed the revenue for tribals so that they might remain at one place. The British aspirations came to a standstill when the jhum cultivators didn't reap the expected yields from settled farming. Many factors were responsible for this unexpected result. As water was scarce and soil was dry, the produce was not good enough, and the tribals suffered losses. Due to this, the tribals protested for the rights to carry out shifting cultivation. Changes in forest laws. The British reinforced the forest laws and declared the forests as state property. There were several restrictions imposed on the tribals, such as no right to the forest produce, restriction on cutting trees, performing jhum cultivation and hunting. Some were not even allowed to live in forests. All this caused a turmoil and instability in the tribal community as they considered the forest and its resources to be their own. All these factors ultimately resulted in revolts. Many tribal groups rebelled against the colonial forest laws. They disobeyed the new rules. They continued with practices which were declared as illegal. At times, some of them also rose in rebellion. The revolt of Songram Sangma in 1906 in Assam and the forest satyagraha of the 1930s in the central provinces are examples of such revolts. Traders and moneylenders. The intrusion of moneylenders and traders created problems for the tribals. They wanted forest produce, granted loans, and aimed to make tribals work as laborers in farms. They offered high-interest loans to the uneducated tribals and charged very high prices for goods in exchange for the forest produce. Trade. The Santhals were a tribe of present-day Jharkhand. They reared cocoons for their livelihood. The traders used to send their agents to the tribals to buy silk. These agents, or the so-called middlemen, derived huge benefits from this trade as they gave very little amount to the growers for their product and sold them at a comparatively high price to exporters. The condition of the tribals worsened in the 19th century when they were forced to work in coal mines of Bihar and tea plantations in Assam. They were made to work for long hours on very low wages and also not allowed to return to their homes. Brain tickler. Why were the tribals forced to work in tea plantations and coal mines? Bhils. Bhils, the archers, were the tribals of Mewar, descendants of original inhabitants of North India. The word Bhil is derived from Bhil or Veil meaning bow. Bhil tribe is divided into two groups. The central or pure Bhils found in mountainous ranges of Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Rajasthan and eastern Rajput Bhils found in eastern parts of Tripura. The Bhils used to equip the princes of Mewar with bowmen or served them by guarding their families. In colonial times, they were employed by Rajputs as shikaris and as warriors. Tribal revolts. The exploitation and the miserable life under the British evoked a revolt in the tribals. There were many sporadic revolts in various tribal communities, including Santhals in Bengal and Bihar, the Bhils in Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh, the Mundas in Bihar, the Gonds and Khonds in Odisha. The major reasons that contributed for the rebellion can be put down as The British exploited the forest resources, tribal lands, and levied heavy taxes. Forceful plantation of cash crops exhausted the soil fertility. The landless tribals were compelled to work in the fields. The British interfered with the tribal culture and rituals, and their isolated life no longer existed. Info Hive. Santals had their own script called Olichki, which was developed by Dr. Raghunath Murmu in 1925. Christian missionaries converted tribals to Christianity and assured monetary gains which greatly influenced them. They were told to forsake their gods and follow Christianity. Most of the minor revolts were violently suppressed, and the accused were punished publicly to invoke terror in other tribals. All these factors contributed to the revolts in various tribal communities. The Kols revolted in 1831-32. The Bastar rebellion in central India broke out in 1910, and the Varli revolt in Maharashtra in 1940. The Munda rebellion was led by Birsa Munda. The rebellion of 1855 to 1857 was a great event in history of the Santals. On 30th June 1855, a massive rally of Santals, over 10,000, protested against their exploitation and oppression. The rally took an oath to end the oppressive rule of the British, zamindars and money lenders, and it decided to set up an independent Santali Raj. Munda Rebellion. One name that will shine in the history of Munda Rebellion is Birsa Munda. He was a visionary and realized that the British had invaded India to torture their people and carry riches abroad. He is reckoned as a freedom fighter who led the tribals to prevent land grabbing by the non-tribals, which made the tribals to end up as bonded laborers in their own land. He organized his first revolt against the British for remission of forest dues. During this period, the Great Famine of 1895 broke out. Birsa spearheaded the tribal movement in the region of Chota Nagpur, and the revolt, Ul Gulan, was initiated, which came to be known as the Great Tumult. Its main objective was to wipe off the British and their agents and establish Munda Raj. He wanted to free the tribals from the hands of the traders and the zamindars. The British arrested Birsa in 1895, imprisoned him for 2 years on charges of rioting. He was released in 1897, and with that, he began traveling to villages to gather support. He asked the tribals to take back their land forcefully from the British. Birsa was arrested again by the British and imprisoned. He died in jail in 1900 at the budding age of 25. Yet the seeds of unrest were sown among his people, who continued to fight against injustice. He aimed not only to abolish British rule, but also to transform tribal communities. Birsa wanted his people to lead an honest life, give up evil practices, discontinue drinking liquor and offering animal sacrifices. Info Hive. Birsa Munda is presently being worshipped as Bhagavan in newly created state of Jharkhand. Elsewhere in the world, the Zulu tribes were located in KwaZulu-Natal province in South Africa. Under King Shaka from 1816 to 1828, the Zulu tribe was known to be the mightiest military force in southern Africa. During the reign of Mpande, the British were allowed extensive control over his peoples. By the time he died in 1872, the Zulus had enough of the English invasion. Setiveyo, who replaced Mpande, tried vainly for 6 years to avoid a confrontation with the British, yet in 1879, war erupted. Although the Zulus won some battles, the British army ultimately prevailed. Within 6 months, Setiveyo was exiled to England, and the Zulu kingdom was taken under the British control. Recap. Tribals live in dense area of the forests and have a different lifestyle, customs and traditions. Interference by the British effected a change in the economies and societies of the tribals in numerous ways. The chief causes of the tribal revolts were exploitation by the British, interference in their customs and traditions, conversion by Christian missionaries, and violent repression of tribals at the hands of the British. Birsa Munda led the tribals to prevent land grabbing by the non-tribals, which forced them to end up as bonded laborers in their own land.